Buddy, to the Joint Transportation Highways Military Affairs first day of our first interim meeting. See Senator Brennan coming in. I just want to do a couple of quick housekeeping items before we hop into the actual agenda and roll call and everything. First and foremost, if you have not signed in, please make sure you sign in. Back underneath the TV over here in the left-hand side of the room to you folks. Just talking to our staff, it's amazing how many times we actually go back to that to find out how to spell your name correctly, and we utilize that on a pretty regular basis. So secondarily, just kind of the general housekeeping rules, keep it respectful, keep it civil, and please keep it on topic as we are approaching anything with public comment. And the last thing that I'll say is just please make sure that everything is going through the chairman and there's no direct conversation back and forth between individual members. So Mr. Chairman, do you have any other opening comments?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Yeah, just real briefly, as far as the way the interim is looking right now, just so in case the members of the public or members of the committee are not aware, Management and Council gave us 5 days instead of 6. No real explanation as to why, but right now, talking to the co-chairman, our intent is to try to get everything done in 5 days. And if not, we'll ask for another one. We'll know more at our next meeting in Laramie, but right now we're planning on only having 1 day in Cheyenne to finish up the interim, and we'll do our best to get it done in that amount of time. And we'll see, maybe more committees will have 5 days and we can all be more citizens and less legislators. So anyway, so just like give update there. If you have any feedback about that, be sure to let the co-chairman and I know, but that was kind of an unusual thing that happened at Management Council.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Mr. Co-Chairman. That is a very important piece of this. So not only for the committee, but also for anybody else who has a topic on the discussions as it related to the agendas. Please know that time is of the essence as we're trying to squeeze in an entire section of interim work into one less day. And I think everybody here understands just how much work we've got. So with that, we will go ahead and open up the meeting. And if I can get a roll call, please, Evie.
Senator Brennan. Here. Senator Furphy. Here. Senator Culp.
Present.
Senator Pappas.
Here.
Representative Berger.
Here.
Representative Nemec.
Here.
Representative O'Hearn.
Here.
Representative Obermueller.
Here.
Representative Pendergraft.
Here.
Representative Smith.
Here.
Representative Stivar.
Present.
Representative Wiley.
Here.
Co-Chairman Boner. Chairman Brown. All are present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to dive right in as soon as I can get my iPad here to work and get going. I do know that we've got YDOT today. Thank you. Got a copy of it right here, so that helps. So we're going to do opening remarks, reports and updates. Director, good to see you. And we just had a brief discussion. So some of the, for anybody who's watching online and also out here, we are going to have a little bit of a breakup in the way that some of the materials are presented. You may not see some of the information a little bit later on until this afternoon. So Director, with that, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Darren Westby, Director of YDOT. Mr. Co-Chair, committee, it's great to see you. It's a big group all in one. So I'm glad we brought in an extra table for Senator down there so she wasn't sitting on Senator Pappas's lap through the whole day. But speaking of Pappas, Senator Pappas and Representative O'Hearn, Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing them the opportunity to be liaison to the Wyoming Transportation Commission. They're very engaged and really appreciate your partnership, not partnership, but just being there and having some of those discussions and being a part of it. So hopefully, if I can't answer a question, these two might be able to. But with me, we have quite a few YDOT employees to help us walk through this agenda. Really appreciate all their work coming into this meeting, trying to be as prepared as possible. As you can tell, we sent out quite a bit of information ahead of time. Hopefully that was helpful to get you spun up on today's meeting, at least on some of the why. Not only why we're doing it, but some of the intent on the importance of what we're trying to accomplish. And as the chairman said, we'll break out some of the statute portion that might be in the statute updates section. We'll break out some of those highway safety stuff and put it with the highway safety section later on in the afternoon. So with that, obviously, we're going to do a quick update today. We have some statute changes. We'll talk about the EV taxation that we had previous last year. We'll talk about e-titling and highway safety. So a lot of good stuff. If you guys can remember during the session, we talked about the interim topics. We brought forward a lot of things from our perspective that we felt that was necessary. And one of them is WYDOT education. I think we'll work on the WYDOT education of what we do, why we do it, why it's so important, the impact of our success and the impact of the state and how they are pretty much right on point with each other. The better we are successful, the better the state is successful. So we'll be continuing on that education this meeting and probably in the future meeting as well when we start diving into some other topics. But understanding the amount of topics that we had to bifurcate it a little bit to get this portion knocked out this today and then dive deeper into some other topics down the road. Mr. Chairman, just a quick update on our workforce. When March of last year, roughly, we were 345, 350 vacancies. A lot of work has gone on throughout the agency as well with ANI and the governor's office, and thankfully out of this body as well to make us a little bit more competitive. And we were able to knock those down from a little over 17% vacant to getting close to 12, 13% vacant now. So we're making strides in getting some good employees hired. Maintenance, highway patrol, dispatch, and the mechanics still seem to be the ones that we're focusing the most on right now. They're the ones that have the highest percentage of vacancies. We're continuing to strive to get those filled with good abled bodies that know what they're doing and can step in and take the reins and roll. We even had Representative Smith had a brother graduate from the Highway Patrol Academy here just last week or two and is now on the road wearing the Guardian of the Cowboy State uniform and badge. And so proud to have him on board. Let's see here. We'll talk a lot about safety and education today. The national rate, there was 44,000 fatalities last year on roadways. In Wyoming, we had 144. Again, that's 144 too many. And so we'll always work towards doing what we can to try to decrease those fatalities. All crashes are analyzed within the agency. We take a deep dive into ensuring, is it a road issue? Is it a behavioral issue? Is it anything that we can change to improve and decrease that risk that's out there, whether it's, like I said, road design, road construction issue, or is it a behavioral thing? And so we'll be talking a little bit about the behavioral side of the house a little bit later today on seatbelts, driver inattention, and impaired driving as well. I know that there was a comment a little bit during the interim discussion when we were talking about these topics that it's multiple times we brought some of these bills in front of you, and there'll be multiple times where these bills have been brought on the floor and have not necessarily passed successfully, but I think from our perspective, if we're not bringing it forward to you as a policy decision and you guys don't have the opportunity to make those policy decisions, we'll lose sight of what we need to be doing to ensure that we're keeping our public safe, whether they desire to be safe as a behavioral based or help us enforce that a little bit more. So I appreciate the opportunity to bring them forward and put them in front of you today. And see where they go from here. So Misty and Taylor will be up here with the crew to talk a little bit about just general statute updates. And if you read through the packet, there's quite a few just general statute updates that we're trying to clean up, get some language. A lot of these stem from the calls that we get, not only from you, but from the general public as to why do we have to do it this way? Why is it so onerous, or why is it not make sense? So a lot of what you'll hear from them today are trying to clean up some of that language and help the citizens and the people that run these programs make it a little bit more effective and more efficient for not only us, but for the people themselves. I talked a little bit about the EV taxation as well. It's unfortunate that that bill didn't get out of introduction. I think we all worked hard this last session to try to nail down a good bill. I guess everything happens for a reason. We have the opportunity now to take another dive into that last minute amendment that was brought forward in the interim that changed a little bit of items that I think we're ultimately okay with, but I think now taking another dive into that, and you'll hear it this afternoon with Wayne and Kim and Taylor as well, or Dennis. We think we can make it better. So I think this gives us the opportunity to continue to tweak that. The electronic titling, really proud of the team has been working well with industry and all the interested parties on the e-titling. I think that'll be an interesting conversation as we get into where we go from here. And really, Mr. Chairman, trying to keep us a little bit ahead of schedule. So I know we have a lot of things to talk about. I think the main thing that I will just continue to keep harping on, our areas of focus at YDOT. We have 3 of them that we're putting forward in our strategic plan and really going to try to focus as hard as we can: people, funding, and brand management. And so the harder we can work towards ensuring that everybody understands what we do, why we do it, why it's so important, trying to ensure that we're putting forward the best face forward every time that we wear the YDOT badge, or every time that we're doing something for the state of Wyoming, that will only help to entice people saying, I want to be a part of that brand. That will help with the recruitment. That will help with the retention on our people side. And then from the funding, the same concept. If we can't justify why we're doing it, what we're doing, it's going to be harder for us to convince you guys that what we need and how do we need to get it either improved upon on our side of the house or on the budget side of the house to ensure that we can keep being successful with our mission, which again, if we're not successful with our mission, a lot of the revenue streams within the state of Wyoming start to not be as successful as well. So those are the 3 big pushes that we're doing in YDOT to ensure that we can keep being successful. So again, I appreciate your time today and really look forward to the conversation and where we go today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, any questions for the director? Seeing none, that's a shock to me. Okay, we will go ahead and we'll open this up. Is there any public comment for opening remarks from YDOT? Okay, I don't see anybody rushing to the table here, so we'll go ahead and appreciate that, Director. Thank you very much for all the information and brevity. And we'll go ahead and move into our 9 a.m., which is our statutory updates. And so we'll bring up our second 2 favorite. They're all favorites, right? So Misty and Taylor, if you guys would please introduce yourself to those that are watching online and anybody behind you, and we'll turn the floor over to both of you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Taylor Rossetti, Support Services Administrator for YDOT. As the director mentioned, what you have before you today, and Misty will be taking you through, is just some statutes that need some clarification or that we've run into some issues on. Also, I did want to point out to the committee here that a lot of this is also due to the electronic modernization that we're going through. As we're going through that, we're looking at processes and procedures. And as part of that, then you look at the statute. And if there's some difficulties in administering law, it just kind of relates to then bringing it before you to make those changes. So that I'd certainly turn it over to Misty.
Ms. Zimmerman.
Chairman Brown, Chairman Boner, members of the committee, my name is Misty Zimmerman. I'm the Driver Services Program Manager. First, let me apologize for the length of this handout. It is quite lengthy. But as Taylor mentioned, as we're walking through our modernization project, or sprinting through, as I like to say, we are identifying multiple statutes that were written in the 90s and are very outdated. So going through and updating our processes and finding ways to make life better for our citizens as well as our staff and employees and state employees across the state. So I'll just walk through it. I don't know, however you choose to do it. If you want to go through a few and then ask questions, or if you want to go through all the way to the end and let me know.
I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and go forward. And I think at the end of each slide, we'll just take a brief, because what I don't want to do is get so far into the discussion that we forget what we talked about 5 minutes ago. So committee, please keep up. I'll ask you to go through at your pace, whatever you feel comfortable with. But committee, if you have any questions, please be ready to fire those questions away. Again, we've got a packed schedule, so just make sure that we're on top of it. But Ms. Zimmerman, the floor is yours, and please at your pace.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. The first statute in front of you talks about, it's 317115B, and that talks about the issuance and contents of our license. We run into an issue oftentimes because the statute states that currently that the driver's license that's issued to anyone over the age of 17 will expire on their 21st birthday, exactly. Which at the time made sense. We were at a 4-year license cycle, but now we've moved into a 5-year license cycle. There's also some additional conflict in the statute where in one place it says the license may be renewed 90 days, and then in another place it says it may be renewed at 30 days. So we have some issues with that. In addition to that, because of the under 21, the requirement for the vertical license over horizontal puts us into a problem when we start looking at card production. So if we're inside of that 30 days, we're good, but we also have to hold that horizontal license back until, in fact, the person's 21st birthday, because they're not able to have that horizontal license prior to that. So what we'd really like to do in this situation, and our recommendation would be to move to the typical 5-year renewal cycle. So any license issued after the client's 17th birthday, which would be a full Class C license, would be valid for that full 90 day or full 5 years. They could renew anytime within 120 days of the expiration date. And it also reduces that problem that we have going from the vertical to the horizontal license with expiration dates. So that would be our recommendation on that. It does give us the additional year past that 21st birthday that the client can come in and reissue that, have that license renewed at any time.
Committee, any questions? Yes, Chairman Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. What's the reason for having the horizontal versus vertical and that distinction of the 21st birthday?
Ms. Zimmerman?
Chairman Brown, Co-Chairman Boner, typically we follow the AMVA standard. You guys have heard me talk the AMVA standard for a long time. Most states, in fact, all jurisdictions issue a horizontal license, a vertical license for under 18 for easily identifying those individuals under the age of 18 and under the age of 21.
Follow up.
Yeah, and is there a reason for that? Why is that for, so if they go to, purchase tobacco before they're 18 or try buy alcohol, what's the reason for the regulation?
Chairman Brown, Co-Chairman Boner, it's exactly that. It's the easily identifiable by all of the industries where you have an age-related sale issue. And so in addition to the vertical thing or the vertical card, our credential also says under 18 until and under 21 until on that vertical credential. So it gives those dates, which would also help in identifying those people. If they were to wait past their 21st birthday, that date would be readily available for anyone, for the individual that was trying to purchase something.
And so just to make sure I'm clear on this, the update that we would be providing through this, it would take that and they would still be a vertical license. It just does not have to be renewed on the 21st birthday. It would say what their birth date is, and they would still carry the vertical license. It would not switch to a horizontal license until they renewed after their 21st. Is that right?
Chairman Brown, that's correct.
Okay. Committee, anything further? Okay, we'll go ahead and go on to the next one.
All right, the second one that we have is the update in the disabled placard. Currently, right now, our permanent disabled placard has a 10-year expiration date on it. As we're moving through the modernization process, we're looking at how we're doing our placards. And we'll actually, occasionally we run into issues where because of supply, we are actually issuing a permanent placard that has a date less than the 10 years because of the time that it's issued. So the modernization project will allow us to print that document in the actual exam station. We're moving to a Teslin type placard that's less brittle than the current existing placard. And so our thought was to, when you issue a permanent placard, right now it currently has a 10-year expiration date. Why not make that permanent? So we would actually move to, the statute specifically says that it will expire within 10 years. We'd like to move that to a permanent. And then also that will be allowable to be replaced or if it's destroyed or lost. So the recommendation is to create a true permanent card and not require citizens to come in after 10 years.
Is there a cost associated with those each time they have to be renewed?
Chairman Brown, yes, there is.
Okay, so this would ultimately be a cost savings to not only to you guys having to print them, but also to the people who are issued them for permanent. It would ultimately be a cost savings all the way around.
Chairman Brown, currently we do not charge for our disabled placards.
Oh,
So that is something that it's.
so there's a cost to you guys, not necessary. So this is ultimately a savings to the state.
That is correct, Chairman
Okay.
Brown.
Committee, anything further? Yes, Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. How much savings? I mean, what do you spend annually on this? Could you please?
Right now, I could, excuse me, Chairman Brown, I'm sorry. Senator Cole, right now, we issue about 5,000 placards a year at a cost of like 33 cents per placard. The Teslin product is a little bit more expensive, but long-term it will work itself out, especially because the Teslin product is currently in use in Arizona and they're seeing less brittle because the existing placard is very brittle, and with the sun and the heat, they are seeing less replacement on those placards because of the damage that's done by the sun.
Yes, Chairman Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. So it references a permanent placard. Is there a temporary one as well as a different type of disabled parking or accessibility placard? Maybe a little bit more discussion, make sure that permanent is truly permanent and there's not anything else.
Ms. Emmerich.
Chairman Brown, Co-Chairman Boner, yes, we do have currently offer two types. The temporary placard is valid for a condition that exists up to, I believe, 6 months. And it's issued based on doctor recommendation. You are eligible for one temporary placard. And then after the condition is expected to last longer than that, then we do move to the permanent placard if necessary.
Follow up.
And so is it possible that you have a temporary condition that lasts more than 6 months? Does that happen often?
Ms. Emmerich.
And then they get the permanent one when it in fact is a temporary condition.
Ms. Emmerich.
Chairman Brown, Chairman or Senator Boner, I would have to, yes, we do see that happen many times, right? We have something like a knee replacement or something that comes in. We have a temporary placard. The condition isn't expected to last any longer than the 6 months or 12 months. I'm not exactly sure. And then we see that second placard come in, the request for a second temporary placard.
Okay.
If the condition is expected to last more than 12 months, then we do go into the permanent placard and then the ability to also issue the plate. Through the county.
Good. Good. Yes, Senator Pappas.
Also, there's a difference in colors. Is that one is red and one is blue?
Ms. Emmerich.
Chairman Brown, Senator Pappas, you are correct. The temporary placard is red and the permanent placard is blue.
All right. I think we can move on to 31-8102A7.
Chairman Brown, the second one on this page would be contents, and this is simply just moving the existing language out of statute to meet industry standard, which is currently for identification purposes that's put on the back of our credential for our identification card only. The other verbiage is very lengthy and it really doesn't do a whole lot of justice. So we're just moving into the industry standard for that identification card.
Any questions on that? Seems pretty straightforward. I don't know who in the world would write these statutes the way we do, guys, but that's my whole point. All right, Misty, you can go ahead, 31-7114G.
Thank you. And let me apologize for the duplicate content on page number 3 of that. So when you look at 31-7114G, what this is doing is FMCSA about 8 years ago introduced what's called the Even Exchange Program. And currently right now we do offer a military skills test waiver for those members of our military service that have had recent experience in commercial vehicles. And the existing statute currently allows for the waiver of that skills test. We are just in the process of putting rules and regulation changes through our commission and through the process. And we would like to start in what's called the even exchange process. And what that does is for certain military operator services, it allows them to waive not only the knowledge test, but also the skills, not only the skills test, but also the knowledge tests that are required for testing. So there's 8 MOSs that we've identified, that FMCSA has identified, that would be eligible to do an even trade. They're military CDL for a commercial federal CDL. So we've worked hard to get this program in place. And we've gotten it through our rules, and we'd like to just make that statute line up with that. And so as soon as that's available, we would like to move forward with that.
Yes, Representative Stibar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said 11 MOSs or 8 MOSs?
8.
All right, I'd like to know what the MOSs are. 1, 2, like I was an infantry guy, but I was driving 5-ton trucks. I was licensed. I had to go through all the same training the other guys did. And in the military, you're task organized. You might have a 71 Lima, which was a clerk typist, that's qualified, goes through training, gets that qualification. Why can't you use the forms, their driver's license form from the motor sergeant that does the testing?
Mr. Zimmerman, I think a different way to ask that same exact question is, as opposed to basing it off an MOS, is there a way to make it based off of their skill set from the motor sergeant?
Chairman Brown, Representative Stiver, this is a federal program, so we do not identify the MOSs that are available for this. We do have the military skills test waiver that allows that waiver of the skills test for all categories, regardless of the type of MOS, but it does require the recent experience. But FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, is the program, or DOT is the program that set those MOSs. So we don't have really the option to change those outside of the federal program, but we do have the skills test waiver if you do not qualify for the even exchange.
Okay, anybody else? Sounds pretty straightforward. I appreciate the clarification. All right, that moves. Oh, yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you mentioned specifically, military MOSs, but it seems like the statute doesn't really specify, it has to be military. Are there any other equivalency, something similar in a civilian world where you would waive this requirement? Is there any other examples other than military service?
Ms. Zimmerman?
Representative Brown, no, Chair or Senator Boner, there's not. Because it's a federal program, everyone is required to go through the same skills and knowledge test. The only exception to that would be the military skills test waiver and then the even exchange waiver.
Okay,
Follow up?
so it's not in our statutes, but it's a federal requirement and it's sorted in there by reference because we reference the federal standards.
Chairman Brown, Chairman Boner, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moves us on.
On page 4 of this, of your handout, this is where one of the things that we've identified through our modernization project. We've talked a lot in the past about replacement license and those types of thing. Our current statute does not have a fee structure nor a allowance for a replacement license. It does talk about a duplicate, but it creates it's also the same fee as the renewal. As we're working through modernization and a citizen has the ability to go online if they have, let's say, lost their driver's license outside of the state or things like that, or just lost their driver's license, our customer portal will allow for that person to go online, request that new credential, and be issued a temporary for themselves at 8 o'clock on a Friday night or whatever time that is. The main reason that we're looking at doing this is, first of all, if a person is going to get a duplicate or going to get a renewal for the same cost, they're going to renew for 5 years. But what's required on the renewal process is all of the examinations that are required, the vision, any knowledge testing, any skills testing that may be required. And so it sort of takes that convenience away from the customer, from the client. What we were proposing here in this scenario is that we walk through that process of setting a fee for a duplicate license, make it a true duplicate or replacement license. It would only be valid through the original validity of the credential that was issued when all of the examinations were done. But it does give the opportunity for individuals to get a replacement if they've lost it, 3 weeks or 3 years or 2 years or whatever that looks like without going in. So we would definitely want to look at the fee structure for this, as well as the criteria of those individuals that would be eligible for this. So you wouldn't want anybody inside of that 1 year renewal cycle necessarily doing that, because you're pushing up against that. Do we need to see them in the office again, or those types of things, or what the examinations would need? But this does definitely add a convenience to the customer. And as we add those services to our online portal, this is one of the ones that we identified very quickly that we needed to adjust.
Any questions? Yes, Representative Stiver.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. What if their license has been suspended and they go in and try to get a new one? Is that system worked out?
Ms. Zimmerman.
Chairman Brown, Representative Stiver, our system is amazing. Let me just say that right now. Yes, it would only allow those individuals that are eligible to have a new credential be issued a duplicate or replacement license. If you're not eligible, if you've been suspended or revoked or for whatever reason, you would not have the ability to do that online through the customer portal.
So question I have is, do you guys track how many of these are reissued or recertified per person? Like, I'm just sitting here thinking of various actors that might be interested in having a new one duplicated, and then they're good and they're sneaky, so they'll go create a new driver's license or sell their old one off to somebody else that looks something like them or along those lines. And I'm thinking younger generations more than the older ones, but do you guys track that? Do you guys have stoppage in place if somebody's losing these things on a regular basis? Like, what does that look like?
Chairman Brown, currently right now with our existing system, we get a duplicate report every month, but because of the antiquated system, we don't have the ability to do a hard stop on individuals that have had a certain number. Our modernized system will generate a report for any person, let's say, that has more than X number, and we set that number of duplicates or replacement licenses. So it'll be very easy to flag that in the future. But again, the system currently doesn't have that ability.
Representative O'Hearn, Vice
Thank
Chair.
you, Mr. Chairman. What is that set number? 3, 5, 18?
Do you have that number yet?
Chairman Brown, Representative O'Hearn, no, we don't have that number yet, because like you said, as we walk through this process, so we kicked off our project in August of last year. So we're about 10 months into the project. And we're currently identifying changes that need to be made for our statutes in Wyoming. And as we walk through these processes, we have a list of ongoing driver services processes that need to be adjusted because of the system. We've been very limited for the last lots of years, since 1986. My mental math is not great on what the system can do. And we're very excited about the things that the new system will be able to tell us. And this is one of those perfect examples of the sort of control we'll have, that ability to, find those instances of fraud.
Senator Colvin, then to the chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on that, I think it's critically important that we backstop this and make sure people with nefarious purposes won't abuse the system. I hear it's pretty amazing system, so I look forward to hearing how you're going to come up with a plan to foil people from doing what was just talked about, because I think it's critical, because you give people away, they will find that they're smart, especially the youngsters who probably would like to get a license, when it wasn't theirs. But I look forward to hearing on how we're going to deal with this. Thank you.
If you have that plan right now, no, I'm just kidding. Senator, but the co-chairman, owner, sorry about that.
All right, and so maybe just a little bit more background, since we're talking about now, what system are you upgrading? What does it affect? What's the timeline? Just maybe a little bit more background for the committee. That'd be helpful.
Ms. Zimmerman.
Chairman Brown, co-chairman Boner. So you remember the TIS fund, right? We've talked that. So this is replacing the Revenue Information System, or RIS, that has been in place for both driver services and motor vehicles since 1986. The system is currently in phase 1 of the project, and we'll be replacing the driver license system. Like I said, we did start in August of last year with our initial kickoff meeting. And as we move through that project right now, we're looking at an early summer of 2025 implementation date, go live. So the system that we're currently using is sort of, it's in place in Arizona right now, and we're mapping that system into the needs that Wyoming has. So we've been participating in weekly gap sessions with the vendor to move everything along so that everything meets our statute. And that is where we've seen a lot of these statutes that are in front of you today identified. So back to Senator Kolb and sort of the nefarious acts that we may see. The system has, not only does it have an in-office system that we utilize, but it's also connected to an online customer portal. It's called 1YO. And so that system is by invite only. So once the customer record is created in our system, then an invite is generated to the individual. There's a multi-factor authentication that we're working directly with ETS on security things that are necessary for that. So as we move through this process, I could talk for hours on this, but I know we don't have the time today. But we're excited about not only the benefits that it has to my staff and our agency, but also the customer benefit that we're seeing almost immediately. Being able to go online and get driving records, being able to go online and see what your status is, what you need to do to clear your status if you are suspended or revoked, pay reinstatement fees, all of those things. The updated system will track that information all the way through from ticket basically to the end of your compliance. So we're really excited. Not only for the information that you would today have to pick up the phone and call driver services or go into our offices, but for that ease of that customer having that availability online at their fingertips. We're very confident in the security piece of this. We've worked directly with ETS. Our vendor is they're up to the NIST standards, all of the requirements that we have for online systems. So we're pretty confident going forward on where we're at, and also the convenience that it's going to give our citizens.
Senator Culp.
Yeah,
And then Representative.
thank you,
Emick.
Mr. Chairman. Do you identify the replacement licenses by a certain number on them so you can void the old license that has now been replaced? Is there any mechanism to do that? Where you would have a way of having it identified as a fraudulent license or a previously voided license because of loss. And so highway patrol or somebody in law enforcement could identify them, or say they go to the county fair and they scan the license to make sure they're the right age. Maybe you could identify them as a voided license. Is there any mechanism for that? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Zimmerman.
Chairman Brown, Senator Kolb, the credential itself would not be voided because they would have, assumed it was lost. But we do have the ability to, when the expiration date, when a new license is issued, the license number itself is not updated. It stays the same unless it's lost for, occasionally we do for religious purposes, stolen licenses. Those are instances where we do issue a new credential number. So if somebody were to steal your driver's license, we could get you a new driver's license number. But the validity date of that credential is really what law enforcement sees. So even if you handed a law enforcement officer a credential that was lost by your friend and they ran that, they would know the new system or any system, actually the existing system updates the issue date and the expiration date. So they would know that that's not the most current credential on file.
How does that intertwine with the information that you were stating earlier, that if we just renew it and it keeps the existing date, is that just the renewal date, the issue date changes and that's it? I guess I'm trying to think, as you're saying, it would automatically update that. Nothing would change on it except the issue date, because the expiration date's going to stay the same if they're just getting a duplicate license. Is that right?
Chairman Brown, that is correct. So the issue date would be updated to the new date, but the expiration date would stay the same. Okay. So you would see the original issue date was 5 years. So the first one, and then the second one might only be valid for 3 years.
Okay. And does that allow then the same person, let's say I lost it and I'm moving and I find it in the bottom of a box, I can go back to using that credential then if I find that? Or what's the purpose if somebody comes across their old license that they've had renewed?
Chairman Brown, we typically tell people that have reported a lost license to destroy the original if they do find it, because it's no longer a valid credential.
Okay, Representative Nemec.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could this be expanded to other ID cards like concealed carry permits and retiree cards?
Ms. Zimmerman.
Chairman Brown, Representative Nemec, that's really a decision that we talk about a lot, right? That does go back to DCI's where they're looking at, but that also runs down the road of the digital credential. And that's really a policy decision that we need to determine what path we're taking.
It's a policy decision for us to make. Mix up more statutes for them to come back in 10 years and tell us we screwed it up again. Okay, I think that's good. What I will tell you, committee, and I'm just gonna throw this out there. If you have more questions specifically on this and the RIS system, please, by all means, reach out to one of these two individuals and sit down and have the discussion. This is something we've been talking about for 8 years now. It's nice to actually hear as we're moving forward, because that has not been playing, but now we're actually hearing it and it's music to my ears. So I appreciate the fact that you guys are moving on this, and I'm very, very happy that we got this in a couple years ago and you guys are already, pedal to the metal on it. So we can move on to page 5, I believe.
So page 5 is one that, again, we have identified through the modernization project. And as we walked through our statute we've identified 10 existing statutes that state the officer will confiscate, the individual will surrender the physical driver's license of a person that's been cited for certain things like DUI or driving under suspension or those types of things. What happens then is the law enforcement officer then takes it into either a local driver services exam station. It may go into their records department. Ultimately, it comes back to us. And then if the credential is still valid at the end of the individual's suspension or penalty, we're then required to send that credential back to them. This statute was developed in the late 90s or early 90s. We're not exactly sure because there's 10 of them that all say this. So they're all varying times. But it was at a point where technology didn't allow the person on the side of the road or the law enforcement officer on the side of the road to determine whether or not the person truly had a driver's license. They relied on that physical credential to determine that ability. That's no longer the case anymore. That physical credential doesn't necessarily mean that that driver has the right to drive. It just may mean that they didn't surrender it to the individual. So law enforcement officers typically are the ones that will automatically scan the individual. It gives a response back from the national system, gives them their driving status, whether their privilege is valid or not. And so what we found is that physical credential no longer means you have the ability to drive. It just means that it's your identification. It indicates that you were previously licensed, but most law enforcement agencies check that status because it changes from day to day. And that card is in their possession. So what it does is it creates an unnecessary burden on law enforcement for them to have to send that credential to us. It creates a burden on my staff. We've dealt with it. We have the card catalog in our office that we have those all in. And then what happens is it also creates an inconvenience on our citizens if for whatever reason that credential doesn't make that back to us, because then we don't have it. They have to go in and they have to, have another one reissued at their expense because who knows where the gap was. So what we'd like to see, our recommendation is that we remove that requirement for the physical credential to be surrendered. Reason behind it is the other places that we have it dealing with it in statute is that Wyoming is a one credential state. You can either have an ID card or you can have a driver's license. So if we take that driver's license away, but the actual physical card itself is not canceled or is still valid as the credential itself, but the status is not, that person has no form of identification. They cannot get on an airplane. They cannot do any of those things because we only allow for one credential. So if the card itself is still active, right, the privilege to drive may not be, we have to break our own rule to give that person an identification card so that they can cash a check, get on an airplane, do all of the things that we all know that you need identification for. So we are looking at removing the requirement in places that we've identified to actually give that physical card back to driver services. I have spoken with law enforcement. We did have some conversations with WASCOP. I don't know if Mr. Allen is on or not. But it seems like because of the advances that we've had in technology over the last 25 years, it makes sense. And so we're asking this committee to walk through that and see what that looks like.
Committee, any questions on this one? Seeing none, seems pretty straightforward there as well. We can move on to page 6.
All right, so on page 6, Chairman Brown, this is just an update that we've determined is necessary to meet up with our federal requirements for serious traffic violations, and this most commonly affects our commercial drivers. In section D, so 31.7.102, section D, currently right now is the statute reads erratic lane change, but there's again, no definition of erratic. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to follow the federal standard under 38351 table 2 and change that to making improper erratic traffic lane changes as defined by Wyoming statute 315209A Romanet I. And that is lanes marked for travel. So it relates it back to our existing statute. So we've got that. In G, H, and J, the current statute just says commercial driver's license. It was not updated when the commercial learner permit went into effect. And so we'd like to add the commercial learner permit verbiage. And then there's two additions to this, and these are both while operating a commercial motor vehicle. One is prohibiting texting while driving, and the other one is prohibiting the use of handheld mobile telephone while driving a commercial vehicle.
And those are just, I'm guessing oversights because those are still technically illegal anyways. This is just allowing us to make sure that they're listed underneath that commercial motor vehicle. Is that right?
Chairman Brown, currently right now, you mean the last two that I've spoken of?
Yes.
They don't exist in the statute, so they were never added when that change was made with FMCSA.
Okay. Committee, any questions on page 6? Seeing, oh, yes, Representative Obermueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the prohibition on a handheld mobile telephone, is that just, or the option of that is a fixed telephone system that they're using inside, or what are you getting at there in terms of the use of a handheld mobile telephone?
Ms. Zimmerman.
Chairman Brown, Representative Overmueller, yeah, so that would be them using their actual physical device versus something that would maybe go over the system in their vehicle. It's pretty in line with what we've seen in other, mostly city ordinances have those mobile device sort of prohibitions right now, and this would take it into our statute.
So is that overcome if it's if the handheld mobile telephone is attached to something within the vehicles? Does that change that? Or
Ms. Zimmerman, I think we're gonna, that's the reason why I asked the question I did. What I don't want to do is get into the finite details of how law enforcement would ultimately look into this, but also just recognizing that the language that we already have in statute, which prohibits usage of handheld cell phones for commercial motor vehicles, it's just being added into this current statute. We must have missed this when this was originally updated. Is that correct?
Representative Brown, Representative Overmueller, yes, that's correct. So it's a law enforcement issue at that point, right? Determining whether or not the mobile device or the handheld device was used.
all right, thanks for
Does that work for you? Okay. Committee, anything further? Senator Cole?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Has law enforcement had an issue with this when they had a commercial vehicle and they believe somebody was using a handheld device instead of a hands-free device? Has there been an issue with charging people, in the past with that violation? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Zimmerman?
Chairman Brown, I think you know the answer to this. Senator Cole, I'm sorry, I would have to defer to law enforcement on that one. This is just a matter of making it into the offense that designates a serious traffic offense.
And I would say that as we look into this again, I don't think it would probably be a side of whether or not that there was, I think this basically becomes a defense mechanism, right? If somebody were to be pulled over and charged with this, they could go back to statute and say, well, this wasn't in statute, so you can't charge me with it. Then it just becomes a situation. What I don't want is a 50,000-pound rig being operated with somebody texting and driving, and they get away with it because they can. So, okay, yes, Representative Pendergraft, and then Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On this handheld note on here, by putting this into state statute, do we then expand the reach of this law? Because I thought I heard that originally some communities had already enacted this. Are we then just taking and making it universal across the state and stepping on the toes of communities that really would rather not have this? Just a question. Thank you.
Ms. Zimmerman, I'll let you, and I see Taylor prepping his microphone. Taylor?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft. I think there's two separate things at issue here. This is specifically moving this language into what's considered a serious traffic offense for a commercial motor vehicle operator, which aligns us more with the federal requirements. I think the local ordinances that you're talking about are really for just anybody. If you see in Cheyenne, you can't use your hand ice in Cheyenne. This is then going to a specific place related to serious offenses for commercial operators. So there's two different things at issue here, really. As far as expanding this into all places by making it in state statute, again, it's just as it relates to serious traffic offenses for people operating commercial motor vehicles. So if you have a CDL and you're out in your Corvette on your handheld phone, this isn't relevant to you. It's only relevant while you're driving the semi and you're cited for this offense. It would then be a serious traffic offense for your commercial driver's license.
Chairman Boner.
And thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Maybe give us a little bit more background, what the significance of having a serious traffic violation is. What's the consequence of that versus just a not serious one, apparently.
All right. Let's be serious about this.
Chairman Brown, Co-Chairman Boner, we've talked a lot about serious traffic violations in the past. Currently right now for your commercial driver, if they get two serious traffic violations in a 3-year period, it's a 60-day disqualification. And the third one is for 120 days disqualification, but that's a 3-year period. So when we start looking at these offenses that are being added here would add those offenses to the serious traffic violation and then the subsequent consequences of those.
Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is this a federal requirement that we change our statutes, or is it not? I mean, should we have changed them before, I guess is my question, or are we doing this as an option to make this type of offense? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Zimmerman.
Chairman Brown, Senator Kolb, again, a lot of these are aligning with things that we've missed in the past when statutes have been updated. This is aligning with 3D351 Table 2, which does outline all of the serious traffic offenses for CDL holders in a commercial vehicle and non-commercial vehicle. So it's not that we're adding this, it's that we're just aligning this with our federal regulation.
Follow up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is it a federal regulation or not that we do this? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Zimmerman.
Chairman Brown, Senator Kolb, we are required, excuse me, we are required to take the same stance that the federal regulation takes on serious traffic offenses for commercial drivers as a state.
Mr. Rossetti.
Chairman Brown, Senator Kolb, I think to say it another way, the way the statutes are currently written, Ms. Zimmerman would already have to apply this standard to a commercial driver. This is simply clarifying that in state statute so that it is clear to everyone involved that we are following that federal standard.
Okay. Committee, anything further? Seeing none, let's go ahead and move on. We are on to page 7.
On page 7, we'd look at 317305 disqualification and right for a hearing, and I will apologize, in the recommendation, there is a typo on the third line. It should be 0.02%, not 8. But what this does is currently right now, a CDL or CLP holder that is convicted of operating any motor vehicle, it's a certain standard for a commercial motor vehicle, and it's a different standard for their non-commercial vehicle. But if they are cited for that DUI on the side of the road, they automatically have a 1-year disqual. Because we do allow 18 to 20-year-old individuals to have CDLs in this state, there's no commercial repercussion in our statute currently. And so what this does is this allows the state to take those action on individuals that are between the ages of 18 and 20 that blow a 0.02 roadside, and take those same, if they are commercial driver's license holder only, take those same repercussions. So the 1-year disqualification for that driver.
Committee? Seeing none, that one's pretty straightforward. And it looks like onto the last page, page 8 here for homicide by vehicle.
Chairman Brown, I do have one more on page 7. We could.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's no problem. Right now, our existing statute 317305Q talks about a driver that obtains their commercial driver's license through fraudulent means. And what we're talking about in this specific statute is I go in and the testing that I was supposed to do has been determined to be not legitimate. We see it oftentimes in some of our larger jurisdictions, larger states, where people go in and hand $5,000 over and they get a commercial driver's license. And so we recently had a case that was identified out of Colorado where the driver had moved to Wyoming. And they failed to retake the tests that were required by the state because of the original CDL was obtained by fraudulent means. And so we went to go and look at what we needed to do for his commercial driving privileges. We did offer him to have a retest here in the state of Wyoming. He chose not to. And then we went to look and see the statute currently says that they must wait to apply. So we cancel their license and then they must wait to apply. But there's no timeline associated with the wait to apply. The federal standard is 1 year. And so we'd like to just add that verbiage in here. And these are extreme cases. We don't see these often. In fact, I've never had one in the state of Wyoming that we've identified. Typically, these are other jurisdictions have identified the fraudulent issue, and brought it to our attention in Wyoming, and then we would be required to take action on the driver in Wyoming. But I've never seen one in the state of Wyoming.
Okay, committee? Seeing none, now we can move on to page 8. We've got 2 left there.
Chairman Brown, this next one that we have is homicide by vehicle. And I think this is one that maybe got missed in 2019 when we updated our DUI laws. So specifically, the statute states that any person that is convicted of operating a vehicle that causes aggravated homicide cannot get a restricted license under our ignition interlock program ever. So if you have been convicted of the aggravated homicide and DUI was involved, the statute says you can never get a license again, basically. So what we're proposing is that we clean up that language that says after the revocation period that's required by the conviction of aggravated homicide, that we then allow that person to get whatever type of ignition interlock license would be required of them per the statute.
Committee, anything on that one? Okay, and then I think we've got the last one here, which is the administrative hearings.
Representative Brown, this one is a little bit vague and I apologize for that, but currently right now there's a timeline. If a citizen wants to request a hearing on an administrative action that's taken by the department by statute, there's a outline, there's a date sequence that's outlined in the statute, and it's very vague and it's very misleading. And so we'd like the opportunity to just work with LSO to keep the existing requirements that are in statute, but clean up that rule so it makes a little bit more sense.
Is this, my anticipation is this would be very similar to the other administrative hearings and just kind of duplicating language that we have. And does this go through OAH then? And so you guys would work with OAH to make sure that everything is done there as well?
Representative Brown, that's correct. Right now, I think the biggest confusion factor that we have is it states that the hearing must be set within 45 days of receipt of the certified record, but it's very unclear of the receipt by who, us or OAH or those types of things. So we just want to clarify that language. It is 45 days from received at OAH, and that's the process that we're currently following, but it's a little bit convoluted in the statute as it exists today.
Yes, Representative Stibar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 45 days should start when the individual receives his letter. He has 45 days from that date to request an administrative hearing, correct?
Ms. Zimmerman.
Chairman Brown, Representative Stiber, no, an individual usually has typically between 20 and 30 days, depending on the offense, to request that hearing to us. And then what happens is we compile the file to ensure that all of the information is available to OAH, and then we directly send that to OAH. And then the hearing needs to be set between 45 days of that date when they receive it. So they have the original 20 to 30, depending on the conviction or the citation, to request that hearing.
Follow up?
Yeah, I'm understanding what you're saying, but my understanding is you have to send them a letter saying this is the action that's happened. And then the individual that does that has 45 days to request that hearing through OH, the administrative hearing process.
Ms. Zimmerman.
Chairman Brown, Representative Stibar, We do send a letter to the individual if action is being taken on their license. That letter states that they have either, depending on the citation, between 20 and 30 days to request the hearing. The hearing request comes through our office. We compile all of the information that's requested by OAH, depending on the type of hearing request that's there. And then we send that to OAH for them to set the hearing. OAH is responsible for all of the hearing processes. Driver Services does nothing but takes the request, compiles the information, and passes it along.
Okay, waving your hands, you're done then? Okay. All right. Okay. Any further questions? Okay, committee, thank you, Ms. Zimmerman. We've got a lot of information there. We had some good discussion on some of this. Before we go into public comment, is there any questions that you would like to ask of Ms. Zimmerman upfront or Mr. Rossetti before we move into public comment? I'm going to try to eliminate the musical chairs if at all possible. Okay, thank you so much. We'll move into public comment on the statutory updates. Ms. Furch. Welcome to your last transportation meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to take just a chance to, Kevin Hawley is here today. He'll be joining the WTA staff on July 1st as incoming president and CEO, and will be taking my place later this summer. So I just wanted to introduce Kevin to all of you today, and he looks forward to working with you.
He looks a little too much like Rennie McKay to me, so I'm thinking. Thank you, Sheila. Please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you a little bit this morning. We're very supportive of the changes that WYDOT is recommending as far as statutory updates that deal with commercial licenses and the exchange program with FMCSA. Appreciate WYDOT being proactive and catching some of this information. It certainly helps make it easier when the updates are in place, and that everyone who's reading the statutes and understands what's happening, it's all in one place, it's all updated, and it tracks with whatever FMCSA is requiring. So we appreciate those updates and are very supportive.
Committee, any questions for Ms. Furch and the Trucking Association? I couldn't imagine so, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further public testimony for statutory updates? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Committee, looking for a motion to have a bill drafted in any way, shape, or form to include some or all. Representative O'Hearn.
I make a motion to accept all that Misty and Taylor brought to us,
Okay.
and having the LSO take a look at it.
Okay. Seconded by Senator Pappas. Committee, any discussion on the motion? I think it's pretty clear. Okay. This is just a voice vote since this is just a draft. So all those in favor of Representative O'Hearn's motion to adopt and have a bill drafted for our next committee, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Okay, that motion passes. All right, we are just a little bit ahead of schedule here, about a half hour. We're just going to continue on. We've got the electric vehicle taxation. What I'm going to tell everybody on this one is we've got 2 hours scheduled on this. However, I do not anticipate us taking a full 2 hours to go through this process. So what we will probably do is we will move right into this. We will skip our morning break. And then what we will probably do is have a little bit of an extended lunch. But this is going to be a rehash of the same information that we went over last year. So the information that we had here that did not make it out, we'll have, I believe, some slight updates from WYDOT, but we will go ahead and go through this. So I believe that we will start out with, do we want to, I guess we'll go ahead and start out with WYDOT. Do you guys, LSO did not have the draft bill. You guys don't want to go through that, do you? I didn't think we had that as part of the package, so.
Mr. Chairman, that is up to you. I can go through it if you would like.
Well, let me ask the committee. We'll see if the committee needs the refresher. Does anybody want the refresher? Seeing nobody chomping at the bit, we'll leave that alone. I think we all understand exactly what we were trying to do. So we'll move right into WYDOT. Got the whole army here. We've got Director
Mr.
Dennis. Yep,
Chairman,
please.
thanks. And you guys come on up while they're coming up. I just was remiss in wanted to introduce one of our commissioners on the Transportation Commission. Commissioner Brant Lyman is behind us. Grateful that he's here and what he does for the commission. So
Absolutely. Thank you very much for being here, Commissioner. Appreciate you showing up and sitting through yet another meeting. I'm sure that was the top of your list to do on a Monday morning, right? And for you three, if you would please just introduce yourself for the record, and I will leave the floor open to you guys.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dennis Byrne. I'm the Chief Financial Officer with YDOT. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Wayne and Kim to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started.
Wayne, please.
Good morning, everyone. Wayne Hassinger, Wyoming Fuel Tax Administration.
Good morning, everyone. Kim Peters, Wyoming Fuel Tax Administration.
Okay. Mr. Byrne, please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you folks received a packet related to Wyoming Fuel Tax Administration, and basically just some things that we wanted to go over that differ slightly from the original House Bill 7. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Wayne and Kim since they're the experts on this.
Okay. You guys just couldn't get enough of it last year. We figured we'd bring you back for a full nother interim. So
Yeah, we were excited. We couldn't wait to get here.
Wayne, we appreciate that excitement. So thank you so much. The floor is yours, sir.
I think if it pleases the committee, we'll just walk through the document we provided. The initial points in the document are just really our mindset from a taxing authority's perspective. What we were hoping and still hope is that we would determine the tax amount using a per kilowatt charge. And there's no pun intended there with the word charge, but to change the taxation from the gross gallon equivalent, the gasoline gallon equivalent, to a kilowatt hour. To clarify the point of taxation to be at the dispenser, which is where the electricity comes out. Identify a rate for a hybrid decal fee. And then we dangerously add the next bullet, really just posing the question about fair taxation. And you know, this is what we do for a living, right? So we know that, like all of our customers, they're not in the business to pay fuel tax, right? We're just a necessary thing. Most of them know they have to do. So we might have a different perspective as far as fair taxation, and this is certainly policy decision on your part. It's just our opportunity to say we believe it would be fair to impose the tax on public facing level 2 chargers. Completely understand. We had that entire discussion last interim, so not looking to have that discussion unless you want to. But it did bring up the question to us, you know, if there are some fast fill diesel pumps, but let's just say at a gas station, there was a super fast fill gas pump and a rather slow gas pump, we would still collect the tax on every gallon, no matter how fast you got it. So that is kind of our mindset of why not level 2, the public facing ones. We would never propose level 1 residential, not if we were saying we wouldn't propose that. So then the follow-up to that is kind of we got the sense that maybe the hesitancy towards the public facing level 2s was because many of them are not separately metered, and that could be a rather large expense, we believe, we were told. So then we wonder if it were a nominal expense to those people, would that make it more appealing to collect the tax on them? So we just put that out there. It's just really from our perspective, not trying to start a discussion that we've already had if we don't need to. Then further down.
Wayne, hold on just a second. Got a question here, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Well, just to remember, another reason I think the committee decided not to go with public facing level 2 is there's a significant fiscal note. I think it's 6 new positions at YDOT, and the expenditure of public funds would exceed what we'd be gathering in the tax. And so I think that was another, since we are having the discussion, in fact, we are having the discussion since WIDOT brought it up. Just make sure we remember all the barriers and all the reasons why the committee didn't decide that was a very good idea. It had, after extensive public testimony, almost uniformly against it too. So that's why I recall off the top of my head why we decided not to mess with level 2.
Yeah, and I seem to recall something very similar. And so I appreciate what we'll do is we'll just plan on going down pretty much a rehash of what we did last year. I think after beating that horse up as much as we did, I don't feel the need on this side of the table to beat the dead horse much more than what we've already done. I think what we'll probably end up doing is do a quick refresher where you guys are at, what we've got the availability to do, and then likely just have a refresh on the bill itself. So.
Sure. Okay, Mr. Chairman, down further in the document, moving forward, we've identified several areas of the bill that could be amended. One thing we know for sure, we need to gain a much better understanding of the language related to standard J1772, which is this brief document here that talks about all things electric charging. And they've updated this specific standard 4 times in the last year. So that is why we thought potentially we would add the language about saying in any future updates. This is it's not really our wheelhouse, but if we updated, like if the federal government updated federal fuel tax stuff 4 times a year, we'd be behind the curve unless we had some kind of language that was comprehensive. So that's why we propose that. Again, we need to find somebody to read this. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be me, but
Wayne, just a question on that. And I'm glad you brought, just so we could even just see just the idea of what that is. I like the idea. And as I was reading through this a couple days ago, my thought on this is, what are other states doing in similar circumstances where something like this is updated 4 times a year? I mean, are they updating their charging rates and it just automatically goes out to the vendors and the vendors have to automatically adjust that? Because like you said, if we were doing this to fuel 4 times a year, I can't imagine all of our gas stations trying to figure this stuff out.
Mr. Chairman, I think every state is doing this differently, which is part of the challenge that when all those fuel tax people get together from around the country, it's one of the few times,
isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the few times we go, boy, we wish the federal government would do this first. But we are creating all these separate practices in every state. Pretty sure that a state like California that's ahead of the curve now, they're probably updating their documents when the federal government comes out with these. A lot of what we think is in here would be equivalent to your gas pump needs to fill at this rate and accept this kind of plug, or I'm just ad-libbing, right? Because I read the cliff notes to this and I didn't even understand those. So I think every state that we've talked to at conferences, everybody's trying to figure out what's the right way to do this. There's just a lot of definitions to the right way. So I don't know that anybody's consistently, when we found this document and started reading it, we started to appreciate there would be a need to address, when this changes, somehow address it without showing up here every time. Yeah.
Okay. That helps explain a little bit. So I appreciate that. Yes, Senator Culp.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's another complexity we haven't even talked about. It's called demand. There's demand factors here, and those fast chargers put a different demand on the system, which hasn't even been discussed. But I think the reality, from what I understand, and I'm in the fuel business, Those are called high-speed dispensers, if you want to know what the actual name of them are. But the issue is when PPNL or whoever the power supplier is that updates their rates, and it happens 4 times a year, well, so be it. And I can assure you that fuel service stations that update their prices all the time, and it's irrelevant. It's not a relevant issue about the tax. You know, that can be changed. You know, they just modify whatever, what they set their prices at in their equipment. Pretty simple. So I think as electricity rates go, I think it seems like we're forced to take that into consideration. You know, the changes in the power company's rates for whatever reason that is, up or down, to be fair about it, just like with fuel. I don't know why we wouldn't do that. And then also I'd like to keep in mind that the demand factor we're talking about for the higher level charging stations is huge. Because especially if they hit them when their renewables are in their fantasy world aren't working, and they have to rely on traditional baseload. So I think it's fair to me that we do number one, modify the rates, and number two, put some thought into demand. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for my chance to comment.
Okay, we won't even finish off don't you agree? But I do appreciate the explanation on that. Thank you, Senator Culp. So, Wayne, let's go ahead and just continue through. I need to close that, have him come back to the one that we were just on here. I believe you're at the imposition portion, the 39-17-303. So.
Mr. Chairman, we believe to remain consistent with the language and the gasoline and diesel fuel tax articles, the following language should be added to the alternative fuels article. And that is really under the imposition. Every person who sells or offers to sell to the retail trade would conspicuously display a sign stating the price per unit, including all applicable taxes. That would be consistent with what's on a fuel pump right now.
Yes, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. Have we considered having the Representative Brown Memorial requirement of a bucking horse and rider on that sign?
I'm glad I've taken over that, but Wayne, if you'd like to answer that, you're more than welcome.
I would love to, Mr. Chairman. We just started considering that right now. Yeah.
All right, on to 39-17-308 enforcement.
Mr. Chairman, we would also suggest the addition of this statement listed here on the handout, making it a requirement to post that, or it's viewed as a misdemeanor punishable as provided in another paragraph. Again, it's just making it consistent with the other 2 articles.
Okay, I do have a quick question and then co-chairman. So one of the things that I know that Ways and Means does with ag is they'll go test these pumps. Is there any level of testing the electricity flow rates from these that you guys have been exposed to, that you guys, Ways and Means, would need to come out and certify these just as much?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, it's something we've talked about a great deal. The state of California published their EV charging station handbook. It's bigger than this. Did a quick review just of the charging stations, and they go out and certify annually that what says is coming out of the pump, actually the dispenser. One of these days I'll get that. What it says is coming out is actually coming out. So the consumer has some type of protection. As we understand it, if it's the number of people hooked up decreases the amount coming out of each individual dispenser. So now, 2 years ago, maybe, we had a discussion with somebody at Weights and Measures, and I'd have to look up his name, and he said, yeah, that'd be us, but we don't know how to do that. We said, yeah, we don't either. But it seems like, again, a consistency thing. We would want to make the consumer feel confident that that is what's coming out of the dispenser.
Ways and Means, Weights and Measures, W&M, Waste
Yeah,
Management.
yeah.
That's all the same.
Co-chairman.
Okay, so going back to the requirements to basically, post a price, is that, would you imagine that there being too many changes in the way that the current folks who are selling electricity EVs operate? I mean, I'm thinking of the big sign, you see from the interstate for the gas station. I don't seem to anecdotally remember any similar signage for an EV charging station. Are you imagining that was that what we would be requiring here, or is it just simply at some point where you go up to the dispenser, it be posted, and I'm assuming that there would be no real changes required of the folks who are, providing this service currently. Is that correct?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, that would be correct. They could display it on the dispenser. They wouldn't necessarily have to have one of the large signs.
Thank you.
Okay. Wayne, I think that moves us on to, well, I guess I'll let you take the wheel here. But it looks like you've got just a little bit more information before we head on to page 2. I don't know if you want to touch on that. It's the other suggestion is the deletion of the word used.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you bet. We would suggest that we delete the word used and changing the word distributed to dispensed on lines 21 and 22 under 39-17-303 imposition C, taxpayer II on page 5 of the proposed bill. The word used could potentially be misunderstood because the charging station requires an amount of electricity to run the dispenser. So, and I don't think we're looking to collect the tax on whatever it takes to run the dispenser, just what comes out and goes into the car. So used could be misunderstood. And then distributed versus dispensed, the director actually said, why don't we use the word dispensed? That's far more on point when we're talking about electricity. And distributed in our area of work, distributors are different than dealers, and people selling electricity are going to be dealers. So if we can avoid any confusion by somebody reading our law, dispenser seems to be a better fit.
So you would prefer us to take action now rather than 10 years and have Taylor and Misty come back and tell us what we need statutory updates? Okay, all right. Committee, any questions on the dispensed and distributed portions? Seems pretty logical there. And then I believe the last portion is that last bullet point there, the calibration and certification.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Let's see. The calibration and certification is kind of what we were talking about a few minutes ago. Just addressing dispenser calibration. So anybody that goes into the business knows that that's part of it, that it has to be certified, for the lack of a better term.
All right. Yes, Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Has anyone put any consideration to the cost to the Weights and Measures folks for the for certification to verify the to calibrate, make sure I guess it's accurate? I mean, it's going to be an expensive proposition with special skills, and I mean, putting that in there, it seems onerous on the Weights and Measures. How the heck are they going to do it? I mean, I'm not opposed to it as, just as a conversation, but how are they actually going to accomplish this? You're not talking about something simple. There's a field that I'm in, both sides of this actually, and it can be done, but I just wonder what the costs are. I mean, instead of putting regulations in here that they have to comply with, how are they going to comply with it? Has anyone had a conversation with Weights and Measures because obviously California's doing it. So with what the costs are, I just wondered if we could, if I could hear that information at some future point in time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wayne, I think that was maybe more of a rhetorical question, maybe not directly to you guys. I do think that that's something that maybe the committee should consider as we redraft this bill and have it reconsidered, if that's something the committee wishes to take on as a discussion. We appreciate you guys bringing that forward. So anything further? Any other questions? Well, we'll get the information, whether or not we choose as a committee. It was not necessarily rhetorical, but the fuel tax examiner certainly don't have the information available. So yes, co-chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think that's a good point. And, we probably want the Department of Agriculture at our next meeting so they can answer just that question, but they're not here today. And so that's something we can definitely make sure they're at our next meeting.
Yes, Representative Obermueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you inform us at all about the acceleration of the use of EVs coming through the state as we consider, when you go back to, well, last year we determined that there was no cost benefit for the level 2 issue. I mean, is the reality on the ground changing at an accelerated rate, or do you have any sense of that?
Wayne?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I think our sense of it would just be nothing scientific, but more of what we hear. I think it's continuing to grow, and that the charging stations are certainly continuing to grow. I don't know that in Wyoming we're ever going to have this. Like half the people are driving EVs. I think the tourists that come visit our state are probably going to be a much larger group that we collect the tax from. But I don't know that I can pontificate because I'm really good at that, but I don't think we have any solid information except that nationwide more people are buying them, but more things are coming to the surface. I just read an article this morning about a guy that took different EVs to an Electrify America station and found out that a number of the dispensers didn't work, or they didn't work very fast, or so there's more and more information coming out, the more of them that are on the road, but hard to tell.
Yeah, just a follow-up thought on that. The cost benefit issue. Earlier, the testimony was, well, there'd be 6 more employees at WYDOT. And at some point, that equation changes to where we're collecting more tax than those 6 employees. And like you said, that tax is coming from other places those aren't Wyoming drivers, apparently. So just something to consider.
Okay, thank you. If you have something to add, go ahead. But we do have Representative Yin is interested in coming in, and he's got a meeting before 10, and we told him we would try to squeeze him in. So if you can scribble your notes down if you have anything to add, but I did want to let Representative Yin in to offer his testimony. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Okay. Representative Yin, I believe you're being let in. There you are. Thank you for joining us remotely, sir. Good to see you.
Good morning.
I know you've got to get moving, so the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for not dressing up. I was going to put a jacket on, but I didn't realize I was going to get cold ahead of time. Members, I appreciate the work done on this bill. I think that we had a good bill coming out of the session. I looked through the department's notes. I think a lot of them are good. I just had some other notes that I sent via email to all of you. I think that the biggest thing for consistency across the electricity, the EV tax, and the fuel tax is that actually the EV tax currently is not exempt from sales tax. So you pay, with the bill as written, you pay for an EV tax plus a sales tax plus the cost of the electricity spent. For fuel tax, you pay fuel tax plus the cost of the gas, but you don't pay sales tax. So sales tax is specifically exempt. And I quoted the exemption as well as mirror language to have that exemption across EV tax. And so that would create that consistency across both. With regards to the electricity to power the station versus the electricity dispensed. And so I think that's the change in definition between used and I think dispensed is fine. Trying to measure how much electricity that the station is using versus how much it's dispensed is actually kind of onerous on both the state, the utility, and the retailer, because you're going to have to differentiate between those two and then keep track of the two. The issue, I think, is the biggest on the utility, because the utility right now, when they exempt the electricity from sales tax, they just have the unified sales tax form, and that's a simple form where it exempts it completely. With a change where you'd have to measure the station's usage versus the amount dispensed, it's going to be a situation where the utility would have to, okay, you're going to exempt the amount dispensed, and so now we also have to, as a utility, keep track of all of the amount that you're dispensing versus the amount that we've taxed. And so we're talking about megawatt hours being dispensed versus watt hours being used by the station. So that's like 1,000,000 to 1 difference in trying to tax just that slim amount compared to what we are taxing, which is the megawatt hours. Seems like a larger administrative burden than the amount of value that we would get out of doing that. I think certification is great. I think we just need to streamline it. So we need to know what that looks like. So I agree with Senator Kolb on that. And just a reminder for the level 2 stations, for residential use, part of that discussion was talking about how we have the registration fee that the good chairman brought as a bill, and that fee would stay in place. So Wyoming residents would still have to pay the registration fee, and that would essentially still be more than all of the taxes, if you levied a tax on level 2s, that they would be paying on a level 2 charger. Plus, the administrative burden is a lot easier to collect that registration fee than it is to collect a level 2 fee across all of level 2 chargers. But the DC fast charger fees make sense, totally supportive. I think you guys should move the bill forward. Thank you. Oh, and happy to answer
Any questions for Representative Bean? Any questions? Representative Ian, thank you so much, number one, for your passion on the subject. And appreciate you being here and joining us remotely. Thank you. And our apologies for not getting you in here any earlier, but I do know that you've got another meeting going forward and I don't see any hands being raised. So appreciate you being here. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm also open by email and phone call to any member of the committee. Happy to chat with you at any time. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, committee, let's go open this up. Department of Revenue and the county treasurers. Do we have? I don't see anybody from the Department of Revenue here.
Mr. Chairman, we have Brett Fanning online.
Oh, Brett is here. Okay, let's go ahead. We'll bring Brett in. Go ahead and bring him in first.
He is here, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fanning, thank you for joining us, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Brett Fanning. I'm the Excise Tax Administrator at the Wyoming Department of Revenue. My comments are going to be fairly brief. I think that Representative Yin had certainly done his research, done his homework, and he's listened to the Department of Revenue's testimony a couple times. So yes, this, as currently is, the sales tax on electricity would be applied to these charging stations. And so in order for those charging stations to not be charged sales tax on these items, he's exactly right. There's really two things that we see in other industries that are used if there were to be an exemption applied to these charging stations. The first one is they have a separate meter. So then the utility company knows exactly what's going to that charging station or dispenser. Sorry to use the language being used. Or they do some sort of electrical study where they have a third party come in and actually outline what is being used for those dispensers. So currently right now, there would be sales tax on these dispensers. In our sales tax statutes, motor fuels do have an exemption from the sales tax. The thought there is to prohibit that double taxation. It is important to note that the Wyoming Department of Revenue would consider these two separate taxes. And if there weren't to be an exemption on the sales tax, we would not consider it double taxation. The best example that we currently have in our statutes right now is on the tobacco side. So if you go and buy and purchase some cigarettes, there is a tobacco tax in there in addition to the sales tax. So we see examples of both of those in our statutes. So with that, Mr. Chairman, happy to sit with any questions you or the committee may have.
Okay. Committee, any questions for Mr. Fanning? Yes, Co-Chairman Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And maybe don't have the answer right now, but maybe as we move forward and we consider this element of exempting sales tax, would the Department of Revenue have the ability to understand what the fiscal impact of that decision would be? You know, what the chunk of money is that we raise from sales tax currently on EV charging stations?
Mr. Fanning?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I'd like to provide a yes or no answer, but it's a little more complicated. I have been doing a bunch of work related to sales tax on electricity over the past year or so. I think I can get a reliable figure, but it's going to be a little more difficult than you may think. Currently, I'd have to get some sort of estimation on the amount of charging stations that we have here in the state of Wyoming and then come up with a cost. So exempting it would certainly have a cost to the state of Wyoming and our local partners. But Mr. Co-Chairman, I'd be happy to do some due diligence and see if I can get something for you.
Follow up.
Yep, thank you. Certainly, I imagine that working with WYDOT, you'd be able to, come up with that figure, but certainly something we need to consider. And like I said, I mean, just last year, we thought that, not to beat the dead horse, but we're more seriously considering, whether or not we wanted to include level 2 chargers till we looked at the numbers and just didn't make any sense at all. So I imagine going to be a part of the discussion moving forward, no matter what we, where the starting point is as we determine it today.
Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe we might have to have someone else come and answer this. I don't know if it's appropriate, but I want to get a clarification about, I'm going to call it a parasitic load. So what you're talking about, say, didn't go in from the charging station into a vehicle. Are you talking about the equipment's inefficiencies that are causing this? Is that what we're talking about? Or just what? I mean, I don't get, the other part that shouldn't be charged, an EV, some sort of taxation for a gasoline equivalent. What part are we trying to separate? Just exactly what this is. Is this the inefficiency of the inverters? I'd like to find out exactly what you were talking about, because I'm a little unclear on what you were trying to convey to me. I didn't understand.
Mr. Fanning, that one wasn't for you. You're not here, so you couldn't see the body directional language here. But that was to our.
Sorry, Mr. Fanning. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That was to our field tax examiner. So any further questions for Mr. Fanning? Seeing none, thank you, Brett, for being here. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. And Ms. Parvasini, we'll go ahead and go on to you. And then if you guys have, we'll bring you back up after this before we go into public testimony. And we'll get that answer from.
Apologize.
No, you're okay, Senator. Ms. Parvasini, a little bit closer. Nice to see you in person.
Yes, good morning, committee. Emily Parvasini, Sublette County Treasurer and Chairman of the Treasurer's Board, here to represent the county treasurers. So as of this spring, there were 41 battery electric vehicles, and those are the full EV that we already charge the $200 decal sticker. So I'm here to speak today regarding the hybrid plug-in proposed fee in this bill. Currently, there are 49 plug-in hybrid electric vehicles available, and in the future, there's approximately 50 more EV and PHEV, which are the hybrid, in production that we should probably be able to see within the next year. The number of EV and hybrid EVs has increased in the last year in Wyoming, even with limited charging stations and sometimes poor performance during cold and wind events. The county treasurers are working to keep track of how many hybrids are registered in our counties. And just in the last year, Teton County, of course, was the winner with the most hybrids, and they have currently 833 registered in their county. Every county at this point, with the exception of a few that aren't yet keeping track, do have hybrids in their counties. So it's definitely something that's trending upwards. We're keeping track of how many hybrids are on the roads, and we as an association are in favor of implementing the fee similar to the EV fee for plug-in hybrids to help with recovering costs that are lost at the pump. These cars are on average 750 pounds heavier than a gas engine car. The main reason for the extra weight is the electric vehicle battery, which can weigh between 1,000 and 2,000 pounds. EV electric motors are lighter than actual petrol engines, but not enough to offset the battery weight. Electric vehicles generally are heavier than gas-powered ones, but the extra weight doesn't do nearly as much damage to our roads as semi-trucks do. And I know that that's something that they're planning on introducing is these EV semi-trucks too as a fleet. And that's going to be a different discussion probably, Mr. Chairman, as we look at what those will end up doing to our roads. But EV drivers don't pay gas tax, the biggest revenue source for our road maintenance and improvements. So states are across the country imposing fees for these vehicles. And while the plug-in hybrids do use fuel, their driving range is such that they can go up to 1,500 miles or more on a tank of gas. Right now, the most fuel efficient one that the common person could buy would be the Chevy Volt, which right now has 100 mile per hour or 100 mile per gallon ratio. So they can drive a long, long ways before they need to fill up. Experts said that EV's additional weight has little impact on the infrastructure, but like other heavier vehicles, they can create more danger when there's collisions, which then again costs more for highway patrol because you've got accidents that happen and fires that won't go out. And so there's definitely more cost associated with these vehicles with these batteries. Motorists drove 3 million electric vehicles in the US roads in 2022. That's 1.1% of all vehicles, but the EV use is increasing, spurred by federal and state policies. Electric vehicles comprise 7% of all new vehicle sales in 2022. And in Wyoming, everyone knows if you want to drive from Cheyenne to Casper in an EV vehicle, you're going to probably experience some range anxiety. That means that for most Wyoming drivers, they also have a fuel vehicle or they're switching to a hybrid so they don't have to have two vehicles. So our EV fees cover at least a portion of that non-gas tax that they're not paying. But when they have hybrids that can drive 2,000 miles on a tank of gas, those fees are not being paid if they're keeping within their range and not having to fuel up. So for our purposes, Mr. Chairman, the committee or the Treasurers Association would like to see those EV fees kept at $200 and the hybrid fees introduced at $100 to try to offset some of those costs. As the number of those hybrid vehicles goes up and up, the tax dollars that are coming back to the state to pay for roads and highway patrol and all the ways that WYDOT uses those funds are diminishing. And I would stand for any questions.
Committee, any questions for Ms. Parvasini, who is on the front lines of the reduced amount of fuel taxes being relayed back down to the, yes, Representative Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. Is $100 enough then, that fee, or is it just a start?
Ms. Parvasini?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Berger, I think it's probably a good start. It's pretty typical of what's being charged by other states across the country for hybrid. And in Wyoming, if you're taking your hybrid vehicle across the state, chances are 2 hours into your trip, you're a gas vehicle at that point, if you haven't stopped to charge. So then they're gonna fuel up in Rock Springs, they're gonna fuel up in Casper because they're gonna need to, especially since we don't have a huge infrastructure of charging stations. They're kind of few and far between. And as it was mentioned earlier, sometimes you come across them and they don't work. So now you don't have a choice. You have to buy gas. So those vehicles will buy gas, just not as much as everyone else.
Committee, anything further? Seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Parvasini. Appreciate you
Thank
making
you.
the trip down. All right, I have got the county commissioners up next. Mr. Russell, welcome. If you'd please introduce yourself for the record.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning. My name is Jonathan Russell. I work for the County Commissioners Association. And I have a brief prepared statement to read for you, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end. You know, counties play a crucial role in ensuring that Wyoming's residents and visitors have access to essential services, including high-quality transportation infrastructure. And to support this effort, the state imposes a tax of 24 cents per gallon equivalent on various alternative fuels, such as compressed natural gas, liquid petroleum gas, liquid natural gas, renewable diesel, and electricity. After deducting taxes on aircraft alternative fuels, the remaining revenue is distributed among the Highway Fund, County Road Fund, County Road Construction Fund, and Municipal Street Fund. Ultimately, counties receive between 20% and 27.5% of the total alternative fuel taxes collected statewide. According to Article 15, Section 16 of the Wyoming Constitution, fuel funds are restricted to paying for highway obligations and the cost associated with the construction, reconstruction, maintenance, and repair of public highways, county roads, bridges, streets, as well as alleys and bridges in cities and towns. Counties have the responsibility to maintain these roads. For example, here in Sweetwater County, there are 1,200 miles of county roads to maintain, and they receive a little over $3 million in fuel tax money per year. As electric and alternative fuel vehicles replace gasoline and diesel fueled ones, our tax structure needs to evolve to meet infrastructure demands. These vehicles are not without their impacts. For instance, a Ford F-150 Lightning truck weighs 1,030 pounds more than its gas-powered counterpart. These heavier vehicles contribute to road damage created by vehicular traffic. If alternative fuel vehicles do not contribute, state and county governments will face declines in funding and infrastructure support. With that said, we do support House Bill 7 as it was written, along with the associated fees for the decals.
Committee, any questions for our other frontline?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Berger.
I guess my question is with the decal fees, why not just keep it one fee? Why just keep it 200 across the board? Why split it up? I understand maybe different vehicles, but they're all heavy. You know, just keep it simple. One, you know, if that's simple.
Mr. Russell.
It's not fair. Mr. Chairman, Representative, well, I don't have a number to give you. I think that this strikes a good balance between generating some money and being fair to the consumer. But we'll allow you to work out those details, and then we'll look forward to being a part of that conversation.
Okay. Seeing nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Russell. I just got an email from Alliance for Automotive Innovation. They pretty much are staying on the same playing field as where they were last time. They support where we're at with the current bill and no need to testify, so no need to let them in. With that, we'll open this up for public comment. Anybody here in the audience for public comment on electric vehicle taxation? Anybody online for it, Eve? Okay. All right, seeing nothing there. Committee, we'll close public comment, bring the discussion back up to the dais. Committee, any discussions, motions, emotions? Does anybody want to see this bill rehashed and brought forward for next meeting to have a discussion on adding in a few pieces of the information? Senator Kolb?
Yeah, I'd make that motion, Mr. Chairman, that we bring back this bill and rework the bill.
Okay, motioned by Senator Kolb, seconded by Senator Pappas. And committee, we received some information from Representative Yin on the taxation. Would you guys prefer to have that included into the bill as drafted, or would you prefer to have that as an amendment prepared and have that discussion at a later date. What's the committee's discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I prefer it to be a separate amendment.
Okay. Okay, so we'll just have, what we'll do then is, I believe the motion was to just redraft the existing bill, bring that back forward. And then I'll go ahead and ask that you guys draft the information and language brought by Representative Yin. And then also committee, as far as the language by YDOT. Would you guys prefer to have that?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator.
I propose that we, on page 5, make those changes that YDOT on the word used and distributed.
Okay. Do I have a second on that? Seconded by O'Hearn. Okay. So let's vote on that motion. Go ahead and have that information adopted into the bill draft as proposed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Okay. Any further motions? Seeing none. All right, so the motion on the table is to have the existing bill from last year brought in with the existing changes brought forward by YDOT move forward. All those in favor to have that bill brought forward next meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Okay, that is adopted. We will see that bill for consideration next meeting. Senator Kolb and Wayne, do you have an answer, or would you guys prefer to talk offline? What would Senator Kolb, would you prefer that to be answered publicly?
I think it's I think good for the public.
Sure. So Wayne, if you wouldn't mind coming forward and just having the discussion regarding parasitic loads and what you guys are, the differentiation, how you guys are trying to separate the information or the electricity being used by just sitting there running versus somebody plugging in and actually drawing power from the grid to charge a location. So Wayne, please, floor is yours.
You bet. Mr. Chairman, the intention, the idea was, again, as the fuel tax people, the belief that we really just want to tax the electricity that goes into the car, not proposing that we create a problem somewhere else, and just the idea that a charging station uses electricity just to run. And Mr. Fanning would probably say that they should get a sales tax off that. I don't know. I'm presuming they do off a gas pump. So really, it was just the idea from our perspective that if we want to tax only the electricity that goes into a car, that would be at the dispenser. And maybe the term used was too broad because the charging station uses electricity to run. Not in any way implying that we should split that and somehow find out how much electricity it takes to run the charging station. That sounds more complicated than this document I'm carrying around.
Okay. Senator, yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so the issue, okay. The charging station, whatever parasitic load it takes to run itself, you got to understand we're talking about inverters. You're talking about something very complex waveform. It is not something simple to measure. It can be done. I think maybe we could find out a little bit more about this and find out if that amount of parasitic load is de minimis to the charging station, because I would think it would be. And why wouldn't we let just an open question to you, why wouldn't we let the operator come up with what they need to pass the cost on per, kilowatt hour to the consumer, because of that charging station is part of that package. And they can meter the charging stations, right? I mean, that's simple enough to do, but to separate that from the parasitic load, which is very difficult to do. I just wondered if it's worth it or not. That's an open-ended question. Is it worth it to try to go down that road? Or do we just say the charging station consumes so many kilowatts of power, and that's what their fees based on, and their other general lights that run the facility would be taxed at the normal consumption rate that we currently pay. I just wondered, getting to these fine details are important, because those weights and measures questions that were asked, it's going to be another yet issue. So I just wonder if it may be a simpler way to look at this, and maybe something to consider, and for me, to come back and we try to take a simplest approach as possible. so we don't cause a bunch of other undue expenditures. That was my, and I'm sorry if I am rhetorical, but I just think it's worth talking about right at this early stage instead of letting it go down the road and it becoming this giant problem that we didn't realize. So just kind of work together and look forward to knowing more about this. Thank you.
Yep, I appreciate that, Senator, and I'm right there with you. So please be prepared to have that discussion, at least a little bit on the taxation side, from the fuel tax side for you guys. Talise, Eve, can we just please make sure that we also have the Department of Ag present at our next meeting for weights and measures to make sure that they're able to discuss this as well. So we'll have them on the agenda to discuss this a little bit deeper. I think these are very good questions from the committee. I think they're worthwhile to have us, and I think you guys are only trying to do exactly what you see is right as well. So I think working through those is going to be a little bit difficult, but this is also what happens when you start drawing new legislation on brand new stuff, and we keep people like Misty and Taylor and invested in a job for the rest of their life. So come back and fix our statutes as needed. So, all right, committee, anything further for YDOT and on EVs? Seeing nothing, you guys are good to go. Thank you very much. We are superbly early. Yeah, now I believe everybody here is here for electronic titling. I see everybody that is here, just in case. Oh, we don't have everybody. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll start the conversation with whom we do have in the room right now. And then we will take an early lunch. We'll take a longer lunch. We'll come out and we'll come back at our normal 1:30. Yes.
Sorry, but I guess when are we going through highway safety?
That'd be this afternoon. Yep, at 3 on the agenda. Okay, and then Senator?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, since we are so incredibly early, could we take a break?
I suppose I can be a slave driver. So we will take a break and then we will go in for probably the course of probably about 45 minutes to an hour into the e-titling portion. I think it's going to be a heavy lift for the committee. And so taking a little bit of lunch in between is probably not going to be a bad idea as well. So we'll take a break here. We'll do 15 minutes. It's 10:25. So we'll be back in here at 10:40. I would say we're running behind schedule, but we're not. But I just wanted to keep us on that same level of tenacity towards keeping us a little early today. So bring us back into order here. We are going to move into the electric vehicle, or I'm sorry, into the electronic titling, the e-titling work group. We're going to start the conversation. I think what we'll do is we'll probably go till about 11:30 and we'll take a 2-hour lunch. We'll come back at 1:30 and continue on the conversation. I think what we've got to start out with is we've got LSO with the information to start us out. So we'll start there. We'll just kind of work down the list. So if everybody takes a look at your agenda, the list of information and who's going to be participating is going to go in order for the most part. The only thing that I'm going to do just a little bit differently is since the clerks are not all here quite yet, we'll probably just move them down to the bottom of the list. We'll have all the clerks testify at the end of this discussion after everybody else comes in. So with that, I believe we have Eve. Are you going to be doing this?
No, sir. We have Clayton Cal.
Oh, so he's going to be doing
online.
it via online. Okay. Clayton, thanks for joining us remotely, sir. We'll turn the conversation over to you, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Transportation Committee. Clayton Caldwell with the Wyoming Legislative Service Office. And here I've provided for the committee a memo summarizing something called an electronic lien and titling system and how that system is used in different states in the country. And what I'll be able to do for us today is simply briefly summarize the contents of this memo, and then I would be happy to stand for any questions. So to get started, electronic titling has multiple components, but states typically begin creating electronic titling systems by creating what's called an electronic lien and titling system, or ELT. And an ELT allows the state and financial institutions to exchange vehicle information electronically and process liens electronically. Now, ELT systems come in multiple types. They can be mandatory, they can be voluntary. Some states have an active initiative to develop an ELT system. Other states have the authority to do so, but have not statutorily mandated the creation of such a system. Some states are somewhere in between, and some states have no statutes on this topic whatsoever. 14 states have a mandatory ELT system requiring all lien holders participate in that system. And examples would be Arizona, California, and Nevada. 14 states have a voluntary system, and that would include Colorado, Nebraska, South Dakota, and Texas. 8 states have an active initiative to create an ELT system specified in statute. One example would be Montana, which is currently producing a comprehensive electronic titling system that's expected to be completed in 2025. 5 states, including Wyoming, have the statutory authority to create an ELT system, but do not currently have any statutes mandating that a statute or mandating that an ELT system be created. And then 5 states do not have the statutory authority to create an ELT system at all. ELT systems provide a number of advantages over paper title processes, and that would include eliminating a lot of costs that are associated with paper titles, like printing and routing paper copies at lien filing. More timely lien notification is going to occur in an electronic system. Improved data accuracy is also something that occurs, reduced fraud risk and improved security. And you can automate titling processes that would normally have to be done manually under a paper system. So that's a brief summary of the contents of this memo. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Committee, any discussion and or questions? Clayton, I think you did a good job. The memo was very well written out and really provided a lot of good information. I think for a lot of people, I think the information was brand new, but to the electronic titling work group, this was all rehashed, but certainly beneficial to me. So seeing no questions here on our end, we'll go ahead and let you get back to your other portion of your day job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and that brings us up to the Department of Transportation. So we've got Mr. Rossetti. We're going to keep you employed again. And Lacey? And just for the record, if you'd introduce yourselves for LSO to make sure we get the minutes correct, appreciate that. And then the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. Again, Taylor Rossetti, Support Services Administrator for YDOT. I'm not getting paid by the word today, so I'll try to keep my end of this brief. As you can see by the stakeholders involved in this discussion, this is pretty diverse, and the way that this actually is going to play out in Wyoming is complicated by the way we do business. Clayton did do a good overall summary, and as he mentioned, we do have permissive language in our statutes that do allow us to pursue this. Which was why we felt like it would probably be a good time as the groups were coming forward and interested in approaching this topic to get together and really try to facilitate a work group. And with that, I'll certainly let Ms. Bruckner here explain kind of what we've done in our role as YDOT. And she can kind of explain the work of the work group, and then folks can speak for themselves.
Ms. Bruckner.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lacey Bruckner, YDOT Compliance Investigation. And we put together this working group after receiving some interest from our customers regarding an electronic titling system for efficiency and timeliness, and just to keep track of titles electronically and manage liens electronically. So we started to look at how many stakeholder groups within the state something like that would affect. And that is where we put together the working group, which consists of county clerks, county treasurers, dealers, the insurance industry, lenders, obviously, salvage pools, towing companies, any stakeholder group that might be affected by moving into an electronic titling system, so that we could ensure nothing was missed as far as needs, or something didn't occur or be put within a system that would cause negative effect on any of these stakeholder groups. So we had our first meeting in September of 2023 and talked about what an electronic titling system would look like in Wyoming, and how that might affect each stakeholder group, and what they would need from an electronic titling system to be the most efficient and beneficial to each group, as well as the citizens of Wyoming. We've had a couple of meetings to kind of go through what those needs are, what we would like to see, be it an ELT system, like Clayton had mentioned, or a fully electronic titling system from application to title issuance to lien filing, release, and all of that. And I think when this is discussed from the working group perspective, we can go into details with that. The group did decide, though, that a fully electronic system upfront would probably be the most efficient, rather than doing it in pieces. And we watched some demonstrations from a handful of vendors that were nice enough to give us a demo just to show us how these systems work, because the group felt that it would be better for us to understand what we needed here in Wyoming as a system, if that's where the group decided to go, if we understood how those systems worked and the variation of software that's available for them. And with that, I guess I would stand for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, committee, let's go ahead and again, this is going to be a pretty heavy lift over the course of the next two meetings for sure. Any questions up front for Ms. Bruckner on YDOT's integration with the e-titling process? Okay, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, you mentioned the working group seemed to think that, just implementing the system all at once instead of piecing it would be most efficient. Is that a reference to the transition to RIS? Or, and maybe if you could just go a little bit more detail what exactly you were talking about, what's the status quo, what are we looking to do piecemeal, and what would be the change that maybe would be more efficient, I guess.
Ms. Bruckner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this electronic titling system, the working group discussed it being a complete system from start to finish, and it would be a web-based platform for electronic titling from application, submission, supplemental documents, clear through to the title issuance. Once there would be a new system in place to replace RIS, the thought process is that system could interface to this electronic titling system, as would the lenders and dealers document systems and the county's systems that they're currently using for issuing titles and registration.
Okay, follow up?
Yeah, so just so I understand, this would be a completely different system that would interface with existing systems and therefore that the new system would be sort of a one-stop shop.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Committee? Seeing none, I'm guessing that means you guys did an exceptional job on preparing the documents and everybody.
Second
You got some more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you mentioned raising fees. Could you specifically state what you think the overall funding requirements would be for this new system and what fees would be affected and what the current fees are?
Mr. Rossetti.
Chairman Brown and Chairman Boner. I think the document you're referring to there is actually the one that was given to us by the coalition. And I certainly don't want to step on that, their ability there. But I think in a nutshell, what we were all looking at is a lot of these systems can be paid for by the transaction, and those are costs that can then be paid through. So it's unknown what that total fee cost would be. I think really what we're looking for is to make sure that it is clear that that's a fee that can be passed on. And I think that the working group can speak a little bit more to detail of what they expect that to be. But that's really, I think, where we're at in the working group is figuring out what it would cost and then just ensuring that it is allowable fee to be passed on, rather than the state or the county or the dealer or somebody else eating that fee. So it's really right now, Chairman Boner, the total dollar amount is unknown. The ask though is to make sure that it is clear that that can be collected from the customer.
Okay. Yes, Representative Obermueller. Now we're getting some life out of the committee.
Waking up. Maybe you already addressed this, but is your vision for this that this would be a replacement for the current system, not an optional system? This would be what everybody does.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Obermueller, the vision would be that this would be a web-based platform that links to all of the existing systems, the systems that the counties use currently, as well as the state's system. So it wouldn't replace the existing systems. It would be just a web-based platform that can interface and talk to the state system for collecting title and registration data and to the county systems for the actual issuance of the titles and filing of the liens.
Committee, anything else? Yes, Representative Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for putting this group together. When you talk about efficiencies, what types of efficiency or types of efficiencies are that we're going to see? And not just through the consumer or the individual, but all, even the banks, the treasurers, what are we really going to see that's going to change? Because there is a part of me that sits there and thinks, okay, web-based, but yet we need internet and we have some rural communities and connecting our, better, obviously that makes for more efficient, but it also sometimes when these systems go down, it doesn't make it so efficient. But what efficiencies are you talking about?
I believe the question is what efficiencies will we see? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Berger, the working group in talking about this, the efficiencies that were discussed were the timeliness in delivering title application, processing title applications, filing liens, the physical paper that goes along with that. So timeliness of that entire process of submitting an application, of filing the lien paperwork, of the lien being perfected on the title, the timeliness there, and then the ability for a person to submit an application online versus going into the county, or the ability for the lender to be able to file their lien completely online, or the dealer to be able to file their paperwork online. for timeliness, and it's all there, and it's in this system that would in theory have a process of workflows so that it doesn't get misplaced, lost in transit, or anything like that. And that is the efficiencies thing.
Okay, follow up?
Perfect. Perfect. And I appreciate that. Those are perfect examples. And then, do you foresee to continue to keep those efficiencies streamlined? Do you guys foresee like a help desk or help center? More of a call-in, if that makes sense, to help them walk through the process. Some people do that process.
Ms. Bruckner, another question, it's similar to what I was going to ask is, what's this rollout? And if this is not something that's in your neck of the woods, as far as that, I think we'll actually probably roll into this with the working group as well. But if you have an answer for that, you're more than welcome to.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Berger, in other systems that we work with in our capacity, the vendor usually provides a customer service number for technical difficulties and things like that, and obvious and troubleshooting steps they usually provide in writing. And so I think that would be available, and once a system like this were to be in place, excuse me, then we would provide some training to the dealers, lenders, and county offices, and anyone who is using the system, so that they had an instruction manual to get them started.
Okay, committee, anything further? Yes, Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on cost. I mean, this is about as clear as mud so far about what these costs may be. The specific question would be, is this going to cost the people living in the state of Wyoming more money than it currently costs them to do the same type of transactions, interfaces, liens, all those? I know different people pay different things, but could you explain who pays what, and there's any negative impact or maybe a positive impact for the customers in the state of Wyoming while they're dealing with situations with the that you're trying to resolve? Just explain the cost if you could.
Ms. Bruckner, again, I think that might be better geared towards the working group. And when we actually hear from them, if you would like to answer that, you're more than welcome to. But certainly from the WYDOT perspective, if you guys have an answer on WYDOT's fees, more than welcome.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, when the working group discussed this, and when we were able to watch the demonstrations from the handful of vendors, all of those systems were user-based or transaction fees. So the vendors got paid by transaction fees. So what that would mean is there would be a transaction fee every time a title was issued. There would be a transaction fee every time a lien was released. And so that would be where that money comes from. So if that cost were to be passed, in some instance, maybe a lender or a dealership would cover that cost on behalf of their customers, or sometimes they might pass that along to their customers. But so yes, there would be an additional cost to a title or filing a lien than what there is now, which would be a transaction fee to supplement and pay for this type of a system.
Okay, committee, anybody else? Yes, Representative O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to have a paper copy no matter what vehicle I own, and everybody else is going to have an electronic copy, correct? Is that true?
Ms. Bruckner?
Mr. Chairman, Representative O'Hearn, yes. So the title record would be held in the electronic titling system. And all the titles that are out there now in existence would remain in paper. That record would still be held by the existing systems that we have today, the county's title record system, the state's title record system. But once this electronic titling system would be implemented, at that point, then all the title records, all the title application records would be held in this system. Any point, if a person wanted a paper title, rather than that title record to be held electronically, the working group determined that they should be able to request that printed title at any time. At any point, if a person, such a, like an individual, purchased a car and wanted to come to the county clerk's office to apply for that title with paper, they can do that, and the clerk's office would enter that information into the system. So it would be mandatory in the sense that at that point, all title information, lien information would go into this system, but there is still the option for the public to apply in person with paper and to obtain a paper title.
So easiest way to say it is best of both worlds.
Right.
Representative Wiley.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you guys for coming. Welcome to Sweetwater County. I represent this community. We're kind of a border community. Would this help expedite, if purchases were made in a neighboring state where, now it could take up to a month to get a title transfer? Could this help expedite that process?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Wiley, it could expedite that process on the application end. But at this point in time, there is not the ability in any state for systems to talk to each other from one jurisdiction to another, one state to another. So it may still take the same amount of time to obtain that title from the prior state. But as far as once that title's here, submitting an application and filing a lien and whatever else documentation goes with that particular transaction, it could expedite that side of that transaction.
Follow up?
Mr. Chairman, follow up. Thank you. So, but in the future, this could help work towards that.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Wiley, yes.
Okay. Co-chairman Boner.
And follow up based off the similar idea, just keep it within the state and among our counties. You mentioned this in interface with both the state system and county systems. Is there an ability for our counties to talk to one another? Or is that not going to change necessarily with, with this new system? And just you referenced the interaction with those other systems. Can you explain just a little bit what those systems are? Do they talk to each other? How does that work?
And Ms. Breckner, I think, again, we're going to wade into this. And so I think I'll tack onto that question. Maybe go into a little bit of detail on top of that on what YDOT's role with the titling process is and what your role, as your memo stated, you guys facilitated the working group. I think a lot of the questions that we're going to have are going to be facilitated and answered by the working group. So maybe if you can answer the co-chairman's question as well as what your role at YDOT is with the issuance of titles and how that works through.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Chairman. So, and I apologize. Can you repeat your question first so that I
Just a brief overview of the current systems that you would be interfacing with. You referenced that. Just a little bit more detail what those actually are. That'd be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in this system, the way that the working group discussed it is that we would want the counties to be able to see their own titles in this system, their own title applications within this system, as well as other counties. So the answer to that question is yes. The counties, each county would be able to see another county's title information within this system. And so they would be able to see title application status. They would be able to see what step or what stage of the process the title application is, whether there's a lien. So if they have a person in County A trying to transfer title or do something, they can look into the system and see if there's been a lien filed in County B. They'll all have access to the system and the records within it to be able to see that easily compared to what we're working with now. As far as YDOT's role with that, we continue to participate in the working group and work with that to what end we have to play with that. But as far as the system that we use to house title records and registration records, that information would still be submitted to us through the counties, and we would still hold the title record and the registration records separately of this titling system, although they would talk to each other as well, just like the counties would talk to each other. And we would be able, as YDOT, to look into this system and see if a lien's filed and where the most recent title of record is.
Committee, anything further? Senator Cole?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. Did the committee discuss having YDOT being the repository for this data and then sharing it from YDOT out to the surrounding counties? I just wondered how, if you know anything about that, maybe that's a committee question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rossetti, you're chomping at the bit there. I saw you.
Chairman Brown, Senator Kolb, the very nature of the way the statute set up the titling and registration process is a county-driven decision. And then we are actually, as Ms. Bruckner was mentioning, we are the central repository for this information, which is, I think, why this ends up being more of a kind of a state-hosted system where they plug that information in and then that pushes it to us. But then this is actually adding the piece where they can pull that information back out. So currently, and they can speak to it better than I, Sublette County can see Sublette County's information, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to see Sweetwater County's information. This system would actually allow that to occur through the system. So in effect, we'd be setting up the system that you described. However, it would keep the registration process based on the county-based system that we have in our statutes.
Okay. I think we passed it through the first sieve. We're starting to get a little clearer here. Committee, anything further? Okay, I've got a couple of questions. So the working group, certainly I've been in discussions with them over the course of the past year and whatnot. One of the biggest concerns that I have is a timeline, right? So YDOT's, you guys have facilitated this. You guys have the central repository portion of this. What's a realistic expectation for you guys moving forward for YDOT's integration and making sure that the state side, what we have control over here in this body, what is a realistic expectation from you guys?
Mr. Chairman, in order to get a system like this up and running, we would need the time to look at in detail what pieces we would need to ask for in an RFP to put out to vendors. And then time to, of course, get a vendor on board to build the system. And at that, once you have a vendor on board, then they would need time to build the system, check for quirks, and make sure that it is able to go. And so hopefully a time period within like 2 years, maybe it's first 6 months to get that RFP out and make sure that it has everything it needs to have to be efficient and user-friendly and workable for all of the stakeholder groups involved, not just YDOT or the counties, right? So I would think realistically a 2-year period to get a vendor on board and get something built would be reasonable.
Okay, so that kind of flows into my second question, similarly to what you just stated. There's other states that have, of course, gone through this process, right? What type of discussions has YDOT had with some of these other states, and what have you guys learned through that process at the YDOT level of what to watch out for? What pitfalls have we seen out there? And as you just stated, drawing up an RFP, I used to do that for the state myself. That's not an easy process. So what have you guys learned in your research from the YDOT level, not necessarily from the working group level?
Mr. Chairman, in visiting with other states and visiting with the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, they also have like a steering committee that's working on electronic titling and putting out best practices and things like that. And the things that we learned from them was, one, to build a complete system upfront, that some of the states that have started out with just the ELT piece of it and then tried to add the application side of it, the odometer disclosure side of it. After the fact, we're having some difficulties. The other issue some of the other states had indicated they had was not making it mandatory, because then you have two record bases out there. Not everything is in this electronic system, which has been difficult for those states to administer. So their recommendations were to make it mandatory and make it a full system upfront. And I guess those are the two main takeaways we got from visiting with other states and with AMBA on this subject.
That's phenomenal information, and I appreciate that, because the list of information that we all got, and I'm sure you guys had as much fun reading through all that information as I did. There's the map, the colored map that displays all the states that do have this or have the opportunity for this. Of course, you look at Wyoming and we were the light green, I believe, and it displayed that we have this option, just nobody's moved forward on it. Well, if we have this option and nobody's moving forward on it, it's going to take somebody to finally shift that gear lever into second gear and actually get us moving on it. So the last question that I have for WYDOT specifically, we've talked about time and we've talked about pitfalls. What do you guys see as your integral role being with this working group? Do you guys see yourselves leading the charge? Do you guys see yourselves facilitating the working group and being there to support? And the reason I'm asking this question in the way I am is that list of the working group members, we have a lot of hands in the cookie jar. It seems like everybody's been working very well together so far. But when we start getting into implementation and we start getting into that process, everybody's fingers start wanting that cookie just a little bit more, and they want to make sure that their voices are heard just a little bit more. So what do you guys see WYDOT's role being in this process?
Chairman Brown, Lacey doesn't want to touch that. I do think, to Senator Kolb's references, we are where all of this information has to go. And we are also the entity in which has to pass this information on to the other national databases. So I think we've got to be the lead facilitator in moving this thing forward. I do think, though, as we start developing the requirements of this, we're going to probably have to sort some of those things, and we may even be in that role of having to make some of the hard decisions to say, you don't get that piece of the cookie, but we'll give you this piece of the cookie. But I think it's going to have to be very collaborative and I think really driven by the stakeholders. But I do think ultimately we're the ones that are going to have to make the final say on what happens. And we'll have to do that through trying to get consensus through that working group to ensure that we meet their needs.
That is exactly the answer I was looking for, is everybody's best friend / worst enemy. So Representative Pendergraft, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just caught something that you said there, and I wanted to clarify. We talked about each of the counties could now go in and look at whatever the other counties were doing. Did I just hear you say that then this all goes to the state, to WYDOT, and then other states would also be able to access this? And would we be able to access those other states? In other words, are we building a national database?
Ms. Bruckner.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, other states would not be able to see the information within this electronic titling system, but the title records would continue to feed to the national title database as they do now. So other states would be able to see that information through NMVIDIS like they do now. I believe that with this system in place, that our Wyoming title records would transfer to NMVIDIS quicker than they do now, which would be extremely beneficial to our counties and to our citizens of the state.
So the answer is not necessarily are we creating a national database, but we are certainly, we already upload. It would just be a more fluid upload of information. Mr. Rossetti, did you have something else?
Yeah, Chairman Brown and Representative Pendergraft. I think one of the things that Ms. Bruckner touched on there is when you think of like big natural disasters and there's a whole bunch of vehicles that get flooded, that type of information gets pushed into the database, which then if you're a consumer here trying to buy that car, that's where you would find out, oh, that's flooded. which is also one of the dilemmas you run into with a paper title, right? I can come to you with a paper title that's clean with a car that was completely flooded out. And if you don't check, you've just bought a completely worthless vehicle. But that's the type of information that we're passing through that national database.
A little more, again, I think we passed through another sieve, so we're getting clearer and clearer as time moves on. And I think this is, it's a huge movement forward. And of course, we authorized this, I can't remember how long ago what the memo said, but nobody's really acted upon it, right? It's been, we always do it this way. It's just a lot easier to do it, you know, the new way that we're moving forward. So Representative Obermueller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Taylor, if YDOT takes charge of this, do you see this as a totally proprietary system built from scratch for Wyoming? Or are you going to be able to pull plug and play components of these pieces from states that have already developed it? Or how do you see that?
Mr. Rossetti?
Chairman Brown and Representative Obermueller. I'll let the working group speak to some of this as well. But sort of the direction that we were looking at going was trying to pick a system for Wyoming that then everyone would be able to plug into. Based on what we're seeing nationally, we do think we'll be able to pick something, maybe not completely off the shelf, but something that is significantly developed that would just have to be modified to be used the way we do work here in Wyoming. So I think it'd be not a full custom job, but also not just a full off the shelf, but we could find a vendor who could come in here and work with something that's already well developed.
Committee, any further questions for YDOT specifically? This is actually putting us at perfect timing. So what we'll do here, thank you guys very, very much. You guys answered a lot of our questions. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and break now for lunch. We've got a 1:30 starting time back up here. That puts us back into, that'll bring us up to the working group update. So we'll have the working group be prepared for that information as we start working forward. And then we'll start working down that list of all the interested parties. So we will see everybody back here at 1:30.